Have you ever wondered how a simple act of kindness can change everything? Some gestures seem small, invisible even, but their ripples reach further than we ever imagine. It was a sweltering summer afternoon at Luna's Bistro, a cozy little restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of the city. The scent of fresh bread, roasted coffee and herbs filled the air, mingling with the soft clatter of cutlery and low murmurs of conversation. Before we continue, if you love stories that warm your heart and awaken emotions that help you to become a better person, be sure to subscribe to this channel and show your love by liking the video. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Sophie, 27, worked the lunch shift. Her hair tied back, apron slightly worn, she moved quickly between tables, balancing plates and smiles with equal care. The heat stuck to her skin, but she hardly noticed. She was used to long hours, worn shoes, and the unending bustle of a busy kitchen. Near the window sat a man, dressed in tattered layers, hat pulled low over his eyes. His face was partially hidden, but his presence was quiet, patient, almost invisible. Customers avoided him. He had the look of someone overlooked by the world. Sophie approached with a gentle smile. "Can I get you anything, sir?" The man looked up briefly, eyes tired but polite. "Water, please," he murmured. Sophie returned quickly with a glass, the condensation dripping onto her hand. She placed it in front of him. "Here you go, on the house," she said softly. The man nodded, taking the water. He drank slowly, deliberately, as though savoring not just the cool liquid but the gesture itself. Sophie walked away, thinking nothing more of it, until she felt a faint shiver, a sense that something about this man was different. She shrugged it off and continued her work, unaware that the tattered man she had just helped was none other than Mr. Jonathan Blake, billionaire, owner of the very restaurant she served in incognito to understand his staff and the world outside his office. As Jonathan sipped, he observed her. The way she moved, the care in her gestures, the unassuming kindness that flowed naturally from her heart. It was a small moment, seemingly ordinary, but in it something profound was quietly unfolding. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, carefully hidden beneath the brim of his worn hat. The sunlight streamed through the bistro window, illuminating the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Each tiny speck seemed to shimmer with life, unnoticed by everyone but him. Sophie moved through the tables with quiet grace. She refilled glasses, adjusted napkins, and offered gentle words to weary customers. Her smile wasn't forced. It radiated sincerity, the kind that warmed a room like sunlight on cold marble. Jonathan watched her, fascinated. Here was a woman who carried exhaustion on her shoulders, yet gave freely of her kindness. No one applauded her patience. No one noticed her subtle gestures, and yet, to him, she seemed to embody something far rarer than wealth or status, compassion without expectation. A young mother with a fussy toddler struggled to contain her child. Sophie stepped forward, offering a soft voice and a helping hand. "Would you like a coloring sheet?" she asked gently. "It might keep him busy for a moment." The mother's eyes softened. "Thank you," she said, relief breaking through her tiredness. Jonathan sipped his water, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. He noted the way Sophie didn't linger for praise, didn't expect recognition. Every gesture was pure, untainted by ambition or vanity. He thought of his life, the boardrooms, the headlines, the endless pursuit of profit, and for the first time he felt a pang of something missing. He had wealth, influence, even admiration, but not this simplicity, not this unassuming generosity. Sophie passed by his table again. She didn't recognize him. He was just another weary customer, another soul in need of a little care. And in that anonymity, she revealed the true measure of her character. Jonathan realized then that he had entered the bistro not to observe, but to learn. And perhaps he thought to be reminded that the richest lives are often lived quietly, in acts unnoticed, yet profound beyond measure. He placed his hand gently on the glass of water, letting it cool him, steady him. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this encounter would change more than Sophie's day. It might change his life forever. Sophie was balancing a tray of steaming plates when she accidentally bumped into Jonathan's table. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir," she said quickly, steadying the tray. The aroma of roasted chicken and herbs mingled with the faint, comforting scent of fresh bread. Jonathan looked up, eyes meeting hers. He smiled softly. "No harm done. Thank you for being careful." Sophie nodded, brushing back a loose strand of hair. "It's my job to be careful," she said lightly. But there was a warmth in her voice, a sincerity that lingered even after she walked away. Jonathan called her back gently. "May I ask you something?" Sophie hesitated, then returned. "Yes." "Why do you treat everyone with such care?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Even the ones who may never notice?" Sophie blinked, surprised. I don't know. I guess I just think we all need kindness. Small things can matter more than big gestures sometimes." Jonathan's eyes softened. He studied her face, young, tired, yet determined and bright. "Even when no one sees?" he pressed. "Yes," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Even then, because if you don't, who will?" He leaned back, letting the words settle in the quiet air. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profits or influence. He was thinking about humanity, humility, and the quiet courage it takes to care. Sophie gave a small smile. "I should get back to work. People are waiting." Jonathan nodded, watching her leave. He realized then that the act of bringing her water, something so simple, had revealed a depth he hadn't expected. And in that moment, he knew this young woman, unknown to him before, was teaching him something he could never learn in a boardroom. He took a slow sip of his water, savoring its coolness, and silently promised himself that he would never forget this lesson, no matter how much wealth or power he held. Later that afternoon, Jonathan lingered near the corner of the bistro, observing quietly. The scent of freshly baked bread mingled with the faint sweetness of pastries. Soft chatter and the occasional clink of silverware filled the warm air. A young man rushed in, carrying a crumpled receipt and looking flustered. He had spilled coffee on his jacket, and his eyes darted nervously around the restaurant. Sophie noticed immediately. Without hesitation, she approached him. "Here, sir," she said gently, handing him a napkin. "Don't worry. Accidents happen. Let me help." Jonathan watched closely, intrigued. She didn't sigh or roll her eyes. She didn't scold or complain. Her movements were steady, her tone calm, full of patience. The young man's shoulders relaxed, a faint smile appearing. "Thank you. I was so embarrassed." "You're welcome," Sophie said simply. "Just take a deep breath. Everything will be fine." Jonathan sipped his water, feeling a warmth rise in his chest. He had seen employees act with politeness before, but this was authentic care, a small, unnoticed act that carried more weight than any grand gesture. He realized then that the true test of character wasn't in the spotlight or in applause. It was here, in quiet moments, in acts that could easily go unseen. Sophie's kindness wasn't performative, it was rooted deeply in her heart. For a moment, Jonathan wondered how many people in the world lived without noticing these small, profound gestures. How many overlooked the quiet heroes of everyday life? Sophie returned to her station, unaware of the billionaire observing her. Jonathan smiled, a rare feeling of humility and admiration swelling within him. Perhaps this young waitress was teaching him more about life than any boardroom ever could. And as he looked around the bistro, the sunlight catching the dust in the air like tiny stars, he understood something vital. True greatness isn't measured by wealth or influence. It's measured by patience, kindness, and the courage to do good without expectation. The lunch crowd had thinned, leaving the bistro bathed in golden afternoon light. The smell of roasted coffee and baked bread lingered, warm and comforting. Sophie was wiping down a table when Jonathan approached, hat removed this time, revealing a face polished, confident, yet familiar. "Excuse me, Sophie," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying a quiet authority. She looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir?" Jonathan smiled, a gentle, almost nervous smile. "I want to thank you, properly." Sophie blinked, unsure. For everything today, yesterday, every act of kindness you've shown, even to strangers who didn't deserve it, or so they thought." His eyes met hers, earnest and steady. "And for treating me with respect, when I was just another man in need of water." Sophie frowned slightly. I don't understand, sir. You've always been kind to everyone." Jonathan took a deep breath. "I'm not just anyone." He reached into his coat and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table. "I am Jonathan Blake, the owner of this restaurant." Sophie's eyes widened. The tattered man she had served yesterday, the quiet figure she had helped without hesitation, was the billionaire owner himself. Her hands trembled slightly as she processed the revelation. You're Mr. Blake?" she whispered. Jonathan nodded. "Yes, I came here not to test you, but to observe, to see the heart behind the apron, and what I saw was extraordinary." Sophie looked down, embarrassed, yet her cheeks flushed with warmth. I just did what anyone should do." Jonathan smiled gently. "That's exactly why it matters. Most people would have ignored me, judged me, or laughed. But you didn't. You showed patience, kindness, and courage without knowing who I was. That is rare. That is remarkable." Sophie's breath caught. The bistro seemed to grow quiet around them, the soft hum of the city fading into a moment suspended in understanding and gratitude. Jonathan added softly, "And that is why I want to offer you something more than thanks. A chance to grow, to learn, and to be seen for who you truly are." Sophie looked up, hope glimmering in her eyes. "Me?" "Yes," Jonathan said, voice steady. "Because you've already shown greatness in ways that money could never measure." And in that small, quiet bistro, amid the scent of bread and coffee, Sophie realized something profound. True recognition comes not from titles or wealth, but from seeing the heart behind every action. Jonathan led Sophie to a quiet corner of the bistro, away from the remaining customers. Sunlight filtered softly through the windows, casting warm rectangles on the floor. The aroma of fresh herbs and roasted bread lingered, mingling with the faint scent of rain from the street outside. "Sophie," Jonathan began, "I want to give you a chance, a real opportunity." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Opportunity? For what?" she asked softly, unsure. "To learn, to grow, to pursue something bigger than this bistro if you wish. You've shown patience, kindness, and integrity. Qualities that money alone cannot teach, and I want to help you develop them in whatever way you choose." Sophie blinked, stunned. Her hands trembled slightly as she grasped the edge of the table. "But I'm just a waitress. I don't know if I deserve—" Jonathan shook his head gently. "It's not about deserving. It's about seeing what's possible. I want to provide you with mentorship, education, and guidance to help you follow your talents wherever they may lead." Sophie swallowed, heart racing. She thought of the small apartment she shared with her sister, of long hours and endless work, of hopes she had buried to survive. And now, here was someone, a billionaire, the owner of this very restaurant, offering her a door she never dared imagine. "Why me?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Jonathan smiled, eyes kind. "Because you reminded me of something important. That the heart, not wealth or status, defines true value, and because I want others to see that the most remarkable people are often those unnoticed, until someone takes the time to see them." Sophie's lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Jonathan replied softly. "Just take the opportunity and let your actions speak. That's all anyone ever needs to see." For the first time in years, Sophie felt a lightness in her chest, a mixture of hope, excitement and disbelief. The bistro, the city outside, even the warm golden sunlight seemed brighter, as if the world itself recognized the promise of this moment. And Jonathan, watching her, felt a quiet satisfaction he had never known. A single act of kindness had led to a bond that could change both their lives forever. The morning sun filtered through Sophie's small apartment window, soft and golden. Her hands trembled slightly as she packed a modest bag, her mind racing with excitement and uncertainty. For the first time, the world seemed full of possibilities she had never dared imagine. Jonathan met her outside the bistro, his usual quiet confidence softened by a rare warmth. "Are you ready?" he asked. Sophie nodded, her eyes bright. "I think so. I want to do my best." They walked together through the city streets, the bustle of traffic and voices blending into a comforting background hum. Jonathan observed her closely, noting her careful steps, her thoughtful glances, the quiet determination in her posture. "This will not be easy," he said gently. "Opportunities are not guarantees. They are chances, chances to grow, to learn, and to prove to yourself that you can achieve more than you ever imagined." Sophie smiled faintly. "I've learned that kindness matters more than recognition, and that the people who see it are the ones worth listening to." Jonathan nodded, impressed by her insight. "Exactly. And remember, the lessons don't come from wealth or influence. They come from patience, persistence, and humility." They arrived at a small, sunlit office, Jonathan's private mentorship space. The walls were lined with books, soft light spilling from tall windows. He gestured toward a table covered with notebooks, pens, and reference materials. "This is where it begins," he said. "We start with small steps, but each one counts. Every lesson you absorb will carry forward, in ways you may not yet see." Sophie took a deep breath and sat down, tracing her fingers across the edge of a notebook. The scent of paper and ink filled her senses, grounding her in the present moment. Jonathan watched her, feeling a quiet pride swell in his chest. It wasn't just about providing resources or guidance. It was about witnessing the emergence of potential, nurtured by empathy and respect. And as Sophie began her first exercises, carefully, deliberately, Jonathan understood a truth that had long eluded him. True wealth is found in the growth we inspire in others, and the courage we give them to step into their own light. The soft hum of the city outside mingled with the rustle of pages, a symphony of beginnings, of lives quietly transforming. Weeks had passed since Sophie began her mentorship, and each day brought small victories and new challenges. The office was quiet that morning, sunlight spilling over polished desks and stacks of papers. Outside, the city pulsed with life, but inside, a different rhythm prevailed, one of patience, focus, and growth. Jonathan watched as Sophie reviewed a set of complex restaurant operations, her brow furrowed in concentration. A minor mistake had been discovered in an order system, something that could have caused frustration or panic. Instead, Sophie paused, took a deep breath, and approached the problem with calm determination. She methodically corrected the error, then guided the staff with gentle instruction. Jonathan felt a swell of admiration. He realized she hadn't just learned procedures. She had absorbed something far deeper: integrity, resilience, and empathy in the face of pressure. Later, during a quiet moment, he approached her. "Sophie," he said softly, "what drives you to remain so composed, so kind, even when others would lose patience?" She looked up, slightly flushed, yet serene. "I think it's not about the money, sir. It's about respect. For the people, for the work, for myself. Wealth can be taken away. Respect, patience, and care, they last." Jonathan nodded slowly. Her words echoed in his mind, stirring memories of his own youth, a time when ambition had blinded him to the small acts of goodness around him. "You've reminded me," he said quietly, "that the truest lessons are never bought. They are lived, noticed, and shared, and that wealth cannot replace the courage of a good heart." Sophie smiled faintly, a mix of humility and pride. "I just do what I think is right. That's all anyone can do." Jonathan felt a lump rise in his throat. The billionaire in him, accustomed to transactions and calculations, realized that the greatest impact came from quiet deeds, small acts of courage, and the integrity to act when no one is watching. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting warm, golden light into the office. Sophie returned to her work, focused, determined, and quietly radiant. Jonathan sat back, absorbing the lesson fully. True legacy isn't built in wealth or accolades. It's built in the lives we touch, the kindness we show, and the character we nurture in others. And in that moment, he knew the ripple of Sophie's heart would extend far beyond the bistro, the office, and even his own understanding, a testament to the power of goodness unmeasured by money. The bistro was alive with a quiet energy that afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting dust motes dancing like tiny stars. Sophie moved among the tables, her steps steady, her smile gentle. Patrons watched her with newfound appreciation, not for her title, but for the warmth she radiated. Jonathan observed from his seat, heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He had spent decades measuring success by numbers, acquisitions, and influence. Yet here, in this modest bistro, he witnessed a different kind of greatness, one measured by care, patience, and unwavering integrity. A young server approached Sophie nervously. I wanted to thank you," he said softly. "You helped me handle a difficult customer yesterday, and it made a huge difference." Sophie smiled warmly, brushing it off. "It's nothing. We just have to look out for each other." Jonathan leaned closer, quietly observing how her words lifted spirits, how her presence inspired calm and courage. Every action, every small gesture, created ripples that touched lives in ways he could never have planned. Later, he called Sophie to the side. "Do you see it?" he asked, voice gentle. She shook her head, curiosity in her eyes. "The respect, the admiration, the gratitude around you," he said. "You may not notice it, but your heart has created a space where people can grow, feel safe, and be their best selves." Sophie's eyes glistened with tears, a soft smile on her lips. I didn't do it for recognition. I just wanted to do what's right." Jonathan reached out, taking her hand lightly. "And that is why it matters more than anything. True impact is never about applause. It's about what you leave behind in hearts and lives." The sunlight shifted, bathing them both in warmth. The soft hum of conversation, the aroma of fresh bread, and the gentle clatter of cutlery surrounded them. Ordinary moments made extraordinary by Sophie's kindness. Jonathan realized that this young waitress had taught him more than any fortune or boardroom ever could. That wealth without empathy is hollow, that status without humility is empty, and that the quiet power of a good heart can echo far beyond expectation. And as he watched Sophie return to her work, confident yet humble, Jonathan knew the world was brighter for her presence, and richer for the lessons she had quietly shared. The evening sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow across Luna's bistro. The aroma of baked bread and roasted coffee lingered softly, mingling with the faint hum of the city outside. Inside there was calm, a quiet sense that something profound had shifted. Sophie wiped down the last table, her hands steady, her heart light. The day had been ordinary in some ways, extraordinary in others. She had served meals, smiled at weary customers, and now, unknowingly, had left a lasting impression on someone whose wealth could never measure the value of her heart. Jonathan approached, removing his hat, his usual polished demeanor softened by genuine warmth. "Sophie," he said quietly, "you've shown me something I had long forgotten. That true wealth is not in dollars or titles. It's in kindness, integrity, and courage that persists even when no one is watching." Sophie smiled, a mix of humility and wonder. "I just try to do what's right." Jonathan shook his head gently. "And that is why it matters. Today I saw the ripple your heart can create, not just in me, but in everyone who crosses your path. That is a power far greater than money, far more enduring than any fortune." Sophie's eyes glistened, and for the first time she truly understood the depth of her own actions. A single glass of water, a simple gesture of care, had become a catalyst for change, not just for a billionaire, but for herself and everyone around her. Jonathan offered her a small, sincere bow. "The opportunities I can give you are only a reflection of the greatness you already carry. Never forget it." Sophie nodded, feeling a quiet certainty settle in her chest. She had been seen, truly seen, and in that recognition her life felt limitless. As the city outside glowed with evening light, Jonathan reflected quietly. He had come to the bistro to observe, to test, to learn about his own world. But instead, he had been taught the most important lesson of all: the richness of a good heart, the courage to act with kindness, and the enduring legacy of empathy. And in that simple, quiet bistro, a billionaire and a young waitress shared a moment that would ripple forever. A reminder that life's most profound treasures are measured not in wealth, but in love, respect, and the courage to do good. Life's greatest wealth is found in the acts of kindness we give freely, the courage to act with integrity, and the hearts we touch along the way. True legacy is not money, status, or recognition. It is the quiet, enduring impact of goodness carried forward.